When millions flood the streets, history doesn't whisper, it roars. It began as a murmur, a whisper in online forums, a quiet call for justice that spread like wildfire across Russia. Within days, that whisper became a roar. By dawn, the streets of Moscow were flooded with millions of citizens, young and old, workers and students, mothers holding flags, veterans carrying memories. They came not for chaos, but for truth. Their banners read one word louder than any slogan: a freedom. A freedom? For years, frustration had been boiling beneath the surface. Rising prices, corruption scandals, censorship, and a growing sense that the government's promises were empty. All of it built a storm waiting to explode. On that fateful morning, the storm broke. From Red Square to the Kremlin's shadow, people marched shoulder to shoulder, chanting against a system they no longer trusted. The sound was deafening, a unified cry that rolled through the streets like thunder. The air was thick with tension. Riot police lined the boulevards, armored vehicles stood ready, and drones hovered above the crowd. Yet for once, fear was nowhere to be found. Protesters carried not weapons, but determination. They waved the Russian flag not as a symbol of division, but as a banner of hope, reclaiming their country's pride from the grip of power. Every chant echoed defiance. Every step sent a message. We are not afraid anymore. International media captured the scene in disbelief. Moscow, a city often seen as tightly controlled, had become a sea of humanity. The energy was electric, the kind of raw emotion that history books remember. It wasn't just a protest, it was a revolution of spirit. People stood on rooftops shouting slogans, musicians played national songs, and digital billboards flickered with messages of solidarity before the authorities shut them down. Even state-run journalists, usually silent, watched with awe and hesitation. Something far greater than politics was unfolding, a collective awakening. As the hours passed, government forces tried to contain the movement. Water cannons fired, tear gas spread, and arrests began. But the crowd held strong. Videos of unarmed citizens standing firm against riot shields went viral within minutes, spreading worldwide. From Paris to New York, global leaders reacted, some in support, others in shock. Russia's streets had become the front line of a historic confrontation between power and people. By nightfall, the chants grew louder, echoing through every street. Ir-O-S-S-E, ya person, yutai. Russia will wake up. It wasn't just about one man or one government anymore. It was about reclaiming a future stolen by fear. Mothers wept as their children joined the chants. Strangers hugged each other, united by a shared belief that freedom was worth the fight. That day, Moscow was more than a capital. It was the heartbeat of resistance. The world witnessed not the fall of a regime, but the rise of a people who remembered their strength. And as dawn approached, one truth became clear. When millions stand together, no power on earth can silence the roar of the people. As the sun dipped below the Moscow skyline, the chants of millions still thundered through the city. What had begun as a peaceful demonstration was now transforming into something no one could have predicted. The crowd surged through the streets like a living tide, relentless, fearless, unstoppable. From the Kremlin's walls to the bridges crossing the Moskva River, every inch of the capital pulsed with tension. Yet in that moment of unity and defiance, an ominous shift was coming, one that would shake not just the streets, but the very foundation of Russia's political system. Suddenly, a sound cut through the chanting, a low, thunderous rumble. At first, many thought it was the distant roll of military vehicles, or perhaps a storm. But within seconds, the truth revealed itself in chaos. The Kremlin could control the airwaves, but it couldn't control memory. And memory, once awakened, is unstoppable. Families searched hospitals and detention centers for loved ones. Names were whispered like prayers. Photographs passed hand to hand in quiet defiance. Artists began painting murals in the outskirts of Moscow. Flickers of rebellion disguised as art. A single slogan began to appear on walls at night, scrawled in black paint. We remember. To the regime, it was graffiti. To the people, it was a promise. Beyond Russia's borders, the world watched in uneasy fascination. Some nations condemned the crackdown, while others stayed silent, unwilling to challenge Moscow directly. But within the Russian diaspora, the spirit of the protest burned bright. Exiled journalists, activists, and students created networks to share the truth that state media tried to bury. From Berlin to London, candlelight vigils were held in memory of those lost in the chaos. And for the dream that had been born, amid the collapse. Weeks passed and Moscow appeared to return to normal. Shops reopened, traffic resumed, and the state's iron grip seemed stronger than ever. Yet beneath the surface, something irreversible had changed. Fear was no longer one-sided. For the first time, those in power realized the people were not as silent as they seemed. The spark had survived, flickering in hearts, whispered in cafes, carried through songs and art. Because revolutions don't end in the streets, they begin there. What millions started that day was more than a protest. It was the awakening of a nation's soul. And though the regime restored order, it could never rebuild what it had lost, the people's belief in its permanence. As one protester later wrote from exile, they took our voices, but they couldn't take the echo. And that echo, the roar of freedom, still trembles beneath Moscow's quiet streets, waiting for the day it will rise again.